Good morning, everyone. Good morning to this webinar. My name is Natalie Thomas. I head up the Swiss Business Hub here in London at the Swiss Embassy. We're part of Switzerland Global Enterprise, and I'm delighted to host today's webinar on wearables and tracking devices with a focus on healthcare. I'm delighted with the distinguished panel here of speakers as well. Who are joining us today as experts in the field, who will, I'm sure, share very interesting insights into this sector and how it's developing and what the trends are and where the opportunities lie for the future. But before I give the floor to and start introducing you to our speakers, I just wanted to very briefly, quickly set the scene and just give maybe a few statistics and a few background information to the wearable and tracking device sector. So as you all know, wearable technology has taken the world by storm over the last number of years. Fitbits and smartwatches are seen as mainstream, and the future of wearable devices shows no sign really of slowing down. And piloted by the increasing demand of consumers to monitor their own health and keep track of their own vital signs, use of wearable technology has more than tripled in the last 4 years. According to research from Insider Intelligence, more than 80% of consumers are willing to wear fitness technology. This growing demand for wearables has generated a boom in the market, and now insurers and companies are seeing how supplying wearable health technology to their consumers and employees is beneficial. So major advances actually in wireless technology, monetization and computing power are driving innovation in medtech, leading to the development of an increasing number of connected medical devices that are able to generate, collect, analyze, and transmit data. The data, along with the devices themselves, are creating the Internet of Medical Things, IoT, a connected infrastructure of medical devices, software applications, and health systems and services. And this IoT is rapidly transforming medtech's role and relationship within healthcare. And just to give you a quick snapshot of the market size and opportunity, Markets and Markets valued the IoT market at $41 billion in 2017 and expect it to rise to $158 billion by 2022. The connected medical device segment, i.e. helping to diagnose, monitor and treat patients of the IoT, is expected to rise from $14 billion in 2017 to $52 billion by 2022. So with this short background, obviously we can all see that it's a really growing, interesting and exciting sector that is developing very, very fast. And I'd like to introduce our speakers quickly and ask them actually to introduce themselves and the companies that they come from. And maybe also if you can all give a quick overview of where you think the future is in regards to wearables, and also what is the Swiss angle really to your activity and in your companies. So maybe if I can start off with Patrick Dumele, who is the cluster manager at Health Tech Cluster Switzerland, to start off.
Sure, thank you, Natalie. Hi to everybody. Well, yeah, my name is Patrick Dümmel. I'm a cluster manager for the Health Tech Cluster Switzerland. That is an association of research institutes, suppliers, manufacturers, healthcare provider, health insurance companies, and the like. So basically, an association along the whole value chain of health technology, where we provide our really platforms for networking between our members. And we often host events, quite clearly not in the last few months, but we will resume our activities. And of course, we have a very broad network within Switzerland among the health tech industry. Currently, we have around 270 members. So your second question was with regard to the future of the wearables. I believe the future is very bright. I mean, you already cited certain market numbers and all that. With regards to Switzerland, what I can say, of course, we do have already a very strong medical devices industry. I would say it's probably among the top 5 worldwide, although Switzerland, regarding to size, is relatively small, but our medtech industry is really world leading. Combining that together with some software insights, know-how that we have on the ground, just remember, of course, Google has the biggest site outside of the US is based in Switzerland, in Zurich. So there is some competence around, and combining the two and heading into the direction of wearables, of course, is very promising.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that introduction. Next, if I can invite Ricardo Delgado, who's the head of Embedded Solutions at CSEM.
So thank you, Natalie, and I'm very glad to be here with all this distinguished panel. Let me just give you a few words about myself and CSEM. So my name is Ricardo Delgado. I'm the head of the embedded software group here at CSEM, mostly working on digital health and wearable technology. So CSEM, for those that you don't know, is an RTO, so Research and Technology Organization, very similar to VTT in Finland or Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, but Swiss size and Swiss quality. And I would say that we focus on transferring technology from the academia to actually the industry, either through the creation of startups or even to helping actual SMEs or companies through licensing bricks or technology, right? So I would say that you said very well, the market of wearable technology has exploded in the past years. We started with something very simple. I would say like consumer devices, wearables, the Fitbit, which I had one of the initial ones, and I say it was a blast to learn how to trick it, right? So we don't have to forget our algorithms designed by people, so they can be somehow fooled. And now we are transitioning to the medical market, which it's totally a new beast. So I would say that we have many things ahead, which are challenges, because we are not talking about toys anymore, but we are talking about the lives of people. So if you go 20% wrong with the steps on your Fitbit, it's okay. If you go 20% wrong on your blood pressure, somebody may die, right? So there is a huge transition there to do, and some people are scared, but I think that there are many opportunities, especially nowadays that because of COVID, we tend to be away from hospitals, and having a remote monitoring with wearable technology, wireless wearable technology plus AI inside is going to be an intensive transition. So many things ahead, and again, I'm glad to be here and discuss with all the panel.
Great, thank you so much, Ricardo, for that introduction. Next, can I give the floor to Roland Herzog, who's the head of technology transfer at AO Foundation. Roland, I think you're still on mute.
No problem. Thank you, Natalie. And good morning to everybody. My name is Roland Herzog. I'm working for the AO Foundation. I'm heading the technology transfer within this organization. The AO Foundation is basically a community of more than 200,000 trauma surgeons around the world. And our mission is to improve patient care in musculoskeletal diseases. We basically do this with 4 main pillars. The biggest pillar is education. So we educate thousands of surgeons around the world every year in best treatment of fractures with surgical methods. We have a research organization in Davos, up here in the mountains of Switzerland, where close to 100 people do research in all aspects of treatment of fractures. Then we have the clinical data group. They do clinical studies to prove the outcome of the methods that are developed up here. And we have the technical commission, where we develop new instruments and methods for the treatment of fractures. With the technology transfer, we have funding streams available where we support many different projects all around improvement of patient care in musculoskeletal diseases. And amongst many others, we also support projects with sensors, with partly wearable, partly other sensors, but data collecting sensors around fracture care. And as you can imagine, the patient journey does not only start with the surgery, but it may start before. And of course, there is a lot of rehabilitation after surgery. And the obvious advantage of sensors there is that we have objective outcome data and can track the patient during his journey to get back into his regular life. The advantages of sensors are that it's real life data, it's continuous data, and in comparison to regular ancient clinical studies, it's just much more easy to collect data there. The AO Foundation has its roots in Davos, in Switzerland, and with the cooperations we have with many partners around Switzerland, we really profit of the very lively and unique ecosystem of health tech in Switzerland. We did also try to do some projects out of Switzerland, but you quickly learn that the system of small companies within Switzerland, they know each other, they know how to cooperate, they know what to expect of each other. That really makes the project life very easy and very fast.
Great, thanks, Roland, for that intro. Next, can I ask Jasmine Caroth, who's CEO and founder at the Tower of Excellence, give an introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. My name is Jasmine Caroth. I'm leading the company called the Tower of Excellence. We're a service supplier for regulatory affairs, clinical affairs, and quality management, and we're specializing in medical technology as an industry focus. I think it's really exciting to be here today because this is really a buzzing area, not only from the use, but also from regulatory aspects. So when we see how regulatory has been changing through the past years, it's been really interesting to see that there's been a lot of acceptance of actual real world data or real world evidence to support clinical studies or clinical outcome evaluations. So that's a very exciting area to be active in at the moment. And I think it's also really interesting to project that into the future and help to shape the future using that data, making it available and making it usable in a safe and interesting way. So I think here's the key to how much do we need to regulate in future and how much do we not need to regulate, or should we not regulate in future? And that kind of discussion I find very inspiring. At Tower of Excellence, we have 3 parts. One part is about strategic intelligence, where of course this plays a very big role. A second part is compliance, where we help our customers reach compliance with their submissions, regulatory requirements, and reach the market using their data that we have. A third part is about efficiency and monitoring success as well, connected to those 3 areas. The part of Switzerland, I think it's really interesting, as our customer are a lot of, is a big spread. So we have bigger customers, bigger pharmaceutical companies, but we also have a lot of startups. And I think that's also a very interesting area or a specialty in Switzerland, that we have that environment of enforcing or supporting startup and new innovation. So I think that's really something that distinguishes us. And we can now also have the opportunity to shape the regulatory environment again in this area. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you so much, Jasmine. And we'll definitely talk about, we'll touch upon the regulation aspect later on in our discussion today, this morning. And last but not least, please can I introduce Tristan Vogel, who's the co-founder of Twice, and the floor is yours, Tristan, for an introduction.
Thank you so much, Natalia. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here on such an incredible panel. My name is Tristan, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Twice. We're a young startup, a spin-off from EPFL in Lausanne, and we're dedicated to helping the life of people with disabilities improve, and so that they can reconnect with their community by giving them back access to life. So we we built powered exoskeletons. So these are robotic devices that can be worn by their users to regain the mobility that they lost in either an accident or a stroke, for instance. So patients with mobility disorders can use our robotic exoskeleton to walk again. And so it's not a wearable sensor only, but it's a wearable robot, which means it's really at the crossroad between the digital and the physical world. It's a robot, so it's able to sense the physical world, but it's also able to act upon it. And so that's I think what makes it a central piece of wearable technology. And it's a tremendous opportunity as the digital world is increasing and evolving very fast. We need these bridges not only to sense the world, the physical world in which we're evolving, but also to act upon it in a very intelligent way, in a way that is cultivated by knowledge in the digital world. And I think the exciting opportunity for us to evolve in Switzerland is not only the level of excellence of Switzerland in the medtech industry, but especially the density of this excellence. Having experts 20 minutes apart from one another on average in such a small country, in such a highly integrated country is a tremendous opportunity for us to have anyone expert in any field at a half hour train ride from wherever you are is of great help for all of us.
Great, thanks Tristan so much for that intro. So can I pose the general, I guess, question to all of you, and it would be great to get your insights on this. So where is the future going with regards to wearables? And secondly, what are the winning technologies in your opinion within this sector? I don't know. Patrick, would you like to start off? I know you hinted a few points at the beginning, but maybe you can elaborate on the topic.
Sure. I believe what, among others, also Richard was talking about was your remote monitoring system for patients. Patients that are not in hospital but constantly monitored. Their health data is recorded and sent to doctors. It was actually just a few weeks ago when the CEO of the biggest university hospital, the University Hospital of Zurich, was talking about not offering beds in the future anymore as a hospital, but offering these remote services, monitoring services. And this is quite a fundamental change, I believe, in patient care, or a part at least of patient care. This could also, in the end, of course, save costs in healthcare system. We see all over the world, and especially here in Switzerland, of course, steeply rising healthcare costs and health premium insurance are going up and all that. So this could be really a solution. And this, I believe, is one of the trends that we will see in the future.
Great, thanks, Patrick. Can I open it up to the other speakers as well?
Maybe I would like to a bit extend the comments from Patrick. I totally agree that we are changing the paradigm to a building full of sick people to actually having a distributed way of let's say handling recovery or things like this. Just to give an example, in terms of maternity wards, we know that many more women are thinking about their living at home, right? Just because they feel more comfortable. That introduces a risk, right? And let's say that we want to still keep tabs on if something is going wrong, right? So the medicalization of these houses it's something which is it's underway. It's being thought how to do it right now. There are some steps to follow in terms of data privacy, how all these data is handled, and so on. So it's not going to come tomorrow, but I think it's going to come very fast. When the technology is there and when the proper regulations are satisfied, it's just going to be an explosion, right? Because it's just going to be so much cost effective, which is at the end what is going to drive the expansion of these this technology. Nobody thought that the Apple Watch would grow so fast. It's not a medical product, but still, you see the point. So in a couple of years, it really took over the market, and now they have huge databases of heart rate with activities and locations and so on and so forth. So in terms of technology, I would say that the wireless part is key. The fact of being able to connect these Internet of Medical Things to the cloud is what is winning, and we just have to wait, really think about how we're going to handle the data, because having like everything centralized in just one location is still a big risk.
Great, yeah, no, totally agree. Fascinating area as well, and fascinating developments ahead of us. Tristan, do you have anything to add to that? Any new perspectives, any new visions for what the future will look like with regards to wearables?
Yeah, if I may add, I think there are three main important challenges that are going to be an incentive to drive the future of wearable technologies. And the first was mentioned, the cost. I mean, the cost factor is probably the main driver of the evolution of wearable technology. The second one is involving the patients in healthcare. It's something that is a new trend as well, involving the patient in taking care of themselves and being the driver of their own recovery. And that is going to come with customization through the collection of data that is patient-specific. We're going to be able to improve the care that is given to the patient and involve the patient more in their own progress. And the third main driver, in my opinion, is the transition from the center or the hospital center into the home environment after recovery or during recovery. This is one of the main challenges today that healthcare is facing, and is also one of the driver of costs. The longer you stay in the hospital, the more you cost to the system. And so the earlier you can do this transition, thanks to sensor technology or thanks to active devices at home that help you exercise, the better you can make this transition happen, and the more you can reduce the costs and the more recovery potential you can unlock on the patient side. So these, to me, are the three main factors that are going to drive the evolution of and adoption of wearable technology in healthcare.
Great, thanks for that. Really important, actually, topic, which maybe we can elaborate a bit more on later as well. Yasminka, do you have anything maybe to add with that regard?
Yes, it's an interesting comment that Ricard made in the beginning with the Apple Watch, because we can observe that big tech like Apple actually is working with the FDA to work on their devices and development. And I think this is a trend we observe with different companies as well, and where we can see that big tech actually takes a role as a player in the whole life science industry. And I think this is really important because it also enforces the voice of the supplier. And it also shows how it changes the perspective. Like, you can use an Apple Watch without understanding exactly what it does, right? You can profit from the benefit of the alert system, or alerting your doctor, or connecting between the different parties in the ecosystem without understanding it. So it makes it available for laymen. And it makes a medical progress available in a much faster way. And I think that's key here, because it's driving by demand. So what we've seen also is that through the COVID situation as well, we have had running clinical trials where you had the opportunity to change into kind of an online monitoring or a remote kind of contact, or abort the study or delay the study. And we've seen that agencies like the FDA have put out guidances to support that kind of transition, with, of course, with certain conditions. But I think that's really interesting, because it puts the pressure that COVID has introduced into something that makes things possible, like introducing apps to communicate within clinical trials. Even though you might not be able to to sell those apps as a product, even that, it still drives change into that direction. And I think that's really interesting as a point to view as a future development.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, thanks for those comments. Extremely important and relevant as well for this kind of whole trend moving forward. Roland, how about you? I don't know if you've got any points to add on to this discussion.
Maybe, yeah, very interesting points that were raised by now. I think, like, if you think about in 10 years, there's probably two ways to get to data collection in 10 years. The one is that there are some very specific, very developed devices that are specifically developed for medical indications to detect specific pathologies. They take the regulatory hurdles pretty early, and they will be highly targeted to one pathology. And then the other way to go there is you have broad data collection, like collected by the iWatch or other Fitbits, whatever, where you have regulatory hurdles and you have not very specific data. And from these two sides, from very specific data to the very broad data collection, somewhere they probably will mingle in the future, and altogether they will get a very detailed picture of the patient. How to get there, which path is faster, is difficult to judge by now. Something that I think will be very interesting to see is, like in biology, huge progresses are made with regards to biomarkers these days, and I guess this will accelerate in the next 10 years. So if you have wearables or implantables maybe that can detect biomarkers in a broad field, that will be very interesting to detect plenty of pathologies, not very specified, just one pathology, but very different ones at once. What I see as an issue that needs to be solved also in this way is the calm down the patient pathway. You know, if patients are able to detect whatever pathologies they have, and there are studies that show if you measure 12 or 13 values of any person in the world, something is wrong with him. And if everybody is able to detect what is wrong about him, there will be a doctor needed to calm him down, because it might be not that serious. And that's then creating lots of work, not supporting work or making work more efficient.
And Roland, you raised a really interesting point as well about the implantables. I don't know if you all have a view on that, but where do you see this implantable wearable technology moving forward? How is it going to be developed? How is it going to be implemented? Do you have any views? Maybe Roland, if you want to start off.
Well, our very specific view currently is that regulatory hurdles are just very, very high. We are in the process to develop an implantable to detect bone healing. But you have many, many hurdles, and in the end, you just have one parameter that you measure. So I guess there will be some breakthrough technologies there, some platform technologies. Once these platform technologies are available, are on the market, they will be made available for more parameters, to measure more parameters. And then it will be more easy to bring them to market. But at the first step, to really develop platforms that are regulated, that take all the regulatory hurdles, that's a big step, and from a commercial point of view, very difficult to achieve.
Any other views on implantables from the other speakers?
So yeah, maybe I can comment something. You know, we try to do as much as possible in a not invasive way, right? So we use a lot of optical sensors nowadays, photoplethysmography, which is like the typical sensor from the Apple Watch, like the light sensor. But there are things that you still need to do in an invasive way, at least if you want to measure it in a reliable way, right? Typical examples is we're going towards the medical domain now, but we've been working with the VIS Center in Geneva for an implantable EEG for patients that have seizures, for instance. And this thing, you cannot do it in a non-invasive way, right? At least not now. And the glucose monitoring is another example. I know that there is like quite a lot of hype of people trying to see if Apple is going to release something in those terms for not in a non-invasive way, right? The technology is not there. So it's interesting to see that we are trying to do more and more things in a non-invasive way. However, implantable still play a role. And if you want to be accurate today, especially for medical devices where you have to be accurate, you still have to rely on implantables, even if it's like a minimally invasive, but you still have to rely on them. And I think it's a good thing. I prefer to have something which is minimally invasive, slightly implantable, that works well, than a company releases something which is non-invasive and people just lose faith on it because they see that it's totally a hoax and it doesn't measure what it's supposed to be measuring, right? So I think that implantables are still there for a long ride, and they're going to be always there because they are going always to be a bit ahead of the non-invasive technology.
And there's actually another question from one of the kind of attendees regarding non-invasive continuous glucose monitoring. It seems to be 6 to 8 months away. What is the panel's perspective on when we shall see this game-changing technology? Are there any comments on that?
It's been 6 to 8 months away for the last 4 years, so still not there. But we are working towards that. But it's hard. Technology is hard. At least if you try to do it with optical means, in some very specific situations, you can get something that correlates with glucose, but it's not something you can measure in a reliable way in a day-to-day life basis. So it's I wouldn't expect like in 6 months to see an Apple Watch with glucose monitoring in a non-invasive way.
Before we move on to the kind of more regulation and data management, I guess, topics, are there any other technologies, in your opinion, that have not been yet implemented, but we could see in the future? Is there any comments from any of the panelists on that topic? Any new trends that are maybe coming up that we haven't seen? No, we've covered all the...
Maybe from my point of view, it's not so much about new parameters, but combination and enabling the combination of the right parameters. And it will start where the benefit is the highest. It was mentioned before that patients will be no longer treated in the hospital, but they will have sensors and stay at home. However, I guess the first step is not to replace therapy in the hospital with staying at home, but outpatient treatment with hospital treatment, with therapy at home. And outpatient treatment, then we have the issue that for insurances, it's pretty comfortable and not expensive. So for insurance, the price is probably lower if they go to the hospital, have a very cheap, quick measurement in the lab, instead of paying a complicated and very expensive device that he has to take home. So from a cost-benefit ratio, there is it's not only the all-over cost benefit, but also the small steps in between. So you have to replace existing procedures that are already efficient with high-tech, and you have to start to do that so in the right place where there is really a benefit available.
No, that's very valid, and I think you've just literally answered a question of another attendee here who was asking regarding the balance between nursing care and MD as kind of hospital care, drastically modifies. Moving on the discussion to another topic, and here we're going to maybe talk more about data and privacy issues. And maybe if I can just quickly set the scene again, where, and I know this was mentioned actually in one of the introductions earlier on by the panelists, but as wearables are used more widely, standards will need to kind of to specify which data is shared with patients and how. And so, we've got you then have this debate of whether you show too much data and then patients get more anxious or self-medicate without clinical support, or you show too little data and then patients potential useful information or feel shut out from their own health data. So it's getting to the stage where physicians could really review those data will require huge investments in infrastructure and skills, and device manufacturers will need to ensure compatibility with also a country's healthcare software. And it's only really when you connect those wearable data to electronic health records through government healthcare apps is where the value really is. So my question to you with regards to data is, how are we going to be managing data and data security with regards to wearables in, now, currently, and also in the future? I don't know, maybe Jasminka, you can kick off that question.
Yes, it's actually a very question. I believe I was just reflecting all the things you can actually see. I discovered the health app in Apple just the other day, more detail, where you can see how much you walk on one leg versus the other leg, or things like that. And I think it's really interesting to distinguish what is it you can measure versus what is it you should measure in order to conclude the right outcome. And until now, in clinical studies, this has been heavily controlled by the companies and the ethic review panels and the system of control. And now this is kind of opened up, and it's interesting to explore and measure, and it opens a lot of possibilities, but also it opens the difficulty of what you create with that. It goes into ethical questions in addition to the security of the data. So that's just what came to mind, looking at what is really relevant to say this device is safe to use, or this device now is diagnostic for this part, to also enable you to react on it and use the data in a relevant setting.
No, yeah, absolutely. Patrick, maybe do you have any comments on that point?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't forget about the patient perspective, or even not yet patient perspective. I believe some part of a population in various countries are quite hesitant to provide any healthcare data. I mean, they do not like to share their personal healthcare information and all that. I mean, we see discussions on the electronic patient. What's the name? The patient record. That people are not, or not all people are yet ready to share their data, even if they have control. Because yes, of course, we still have issues with data security and all that. Were breaches in the media of different companies worldwide where data was stolen or accessed by third parties. And of course, this makes a lot of people feel insecure or hesitant about sharing their data. So we definitely, when designing products, this aspect needs to be taken into account.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Actually, sorry, Patrick, to that point, what about cyber security threats? I mean, and breaches, that's probably going to be a trend in the future as well, potentially, right?
Absolutely, and I see potential, of course, for a lot of companies in providing specialized services to prevent such breaches. We hosted for several years a symposium here in Switzerland on data security and cybersecurity with specific regard to medical devices and devices used especially in a hospital environment. I mean, yes, the risk is still there. People are aware of it, but sometimes I believe precaution measures are not taken accordingly. So more investment, I believe, needs to go into that, and more management attention as well.
Absolutely. Tristan, do you have any comments maybe to that point? Or to the data points in general?
Absolutely. I think this is a crucial aspect. Data is of so much value in the healthcare ecosystem. We need to collect it in the sense that it is going to provide value to the patients. But we also need to make sure that patients are appropriately informed about what data is collected, this is a process that needs to happen under their consent, and we need to not forget that this data is owned by the patients, and we need to inform them that we're collecting their data, we're collecting their data together, and this data is owned by them. And I think at this point, typically stealing data or just collecting data without consent is going to be a major issue. And it's like stealing a gold mine under someone's land. If you want to go long down the road of exploiting this gold mine, you need to agree on what you're collecting. You need to raise awareness and make sure you have appropriate consent, informed consent from patients in order to leverage that data in the best way. I think initiatives like data banks, centralized data banks, where patients can host their data in a centralized way and keep ownership on the data is important, and also understand how the data is used further on by service providers or device manufacturers and so on.
Absolutely. There's actually quite an interesting question from Christoph, one of the attendees, who asks, does the Swiss health system participate in the GAIAX standardization for health data exchange? And would this be a way for guaranteeing secure data exchange? You know, if anyone can comment on that question? No? We don't know. I don't know, Ricardo or Roland, do you have any other comments maybe on data and data protection?
Yeah, so there are new regulations coming along in terms of cybersecurity for medical devices, and this is always changing, right? So we had the GDPR a few years ago that entered into force, and nobody really knew how to react to it, but people got very, let's say, conservative in terms of gathering data. I remember that the first day of the GDPR, we had some startups that instead of they usually used to like send all the data to the cloud, and then they did their number crunching, their AI, and then they push back the results to the smartphone of the person. But at that point, they started to consider to roll back all the AI, all the intelligence, all the algorithms back into the device itself. So they never got any kind of data. So that was one of the, let's say, results of having the GDPR. I don't think the public really understand what the GDPR is about, that they own the data and so on. And I think it's a good thing. So we really have to be moving in this direction, but we should really focus on not slowing down the development of new machine learning based algorithms. So otherwise, countries where the regulation of data protection is lower, they would just have more data which is available, and they would just go faster to develop these kind of systems. You know, it's always a trade-off, right? And I think that the newer generations less about the data privacy because they are more used to sharing. So we could see a shift in the years to come. People would care a bit less, or younger generations would care a bit less about hoarding the data just for themselves, and as long as they see the benefit of actually sharing this data. So we have to create a good incentive structure in that case for the final user.
But if we take a step back, who actually, at the end of the day, will own and decide on the data? You know, will it be the government? Will it be the customer, the consumer, or will it be the company, the corporation? What is your view on this?
I would say that the GDPR states that the data is of the user, so whoever generated this data, right? Then it can be always transferred to data processors and so on and so forth. And but the user as a single entity doesn't do anything with the data, right? Doesn't know what to do. So at the end, what is of benefit to that person is a fact of, you know, if all of my data stream is going to a particular hospital and they send me notifications like, okay, move more or eat differently, or your glucose is very low, you know, you have these kinds of interventions. There is a benefit. So I see still the ownership laying into the user, into the people who actually produce the data, but having already structures that who process the data adds value to the final user. We still have to see exactly how this is going to work in terms of business. I don't think anybody has still figured out properly, but we have to build something like this. Otherwise, people will just hoard data and there will be no AI built on top of that.
And is that a consistent view of the other panelists?
I have just one more comment. If we're talking like that, and I think it's very good points that we make here, it's projected like a one-way street. So the patient generates the data, and then it's going backwards. No, the user is generating data, and it's his. So it's that way, right? The device generates the data with the patient. But we have another way as well that I think also adds a lot of value, and this is something I think we should explore more in detail in future. I think this is coming back to the future view here, is that how this data is used, and if something happens, like if there's an incident, how is that being reported back? In a controlled area, you always count and you follow up all the patients individually, but here is more open, so the data is in different places. Can I enter an information into the Apple Watch to let Apple know that this data set created this clinical outcome, or if it doesn't work? So it's in both ways. I think a very interesting thing to explore how to implement that. So there's a two-way communication between the supplier and the patient. I think that's a critical point for the future to consider building that kind of system.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tristan, I see you have.
If I may add, there's on the technology radar, there's a couple of interesting emerging technologies in terms of computing and in particular in terms of cryptography. So there are new algorithms that are emerging that will allow the computing and the analysis of large-scale data sets without having to reveal the data to everyone. So patients will be able to run software on their data and make analysis on an entire set of data without having to reveal the data to other people. Typically, algorithms like private set intersection, that is using cryptography to leverage the data of multiple users without having these users to actually explicitly share the data or share knowledge on the data itself to other people, but still being able to compute and analyze the data in a global way and find out relevant information in this data without having to reveal it. So I think there's not just sensor technology and so on that is going to have an impact on how we can leverage that information.
No,
interesting. Sorry.
No, please, Roland, go ahead.
Sorry, Patrick. Yeah, maybe another interesting point is that whilst data ownership is clarified by GDPR, it belongs to the patient. But as soon as you enter a hospital, you usually sign a contract, and in there you state that your data may be used for research and development, but maybe also for commercial purposes. And then somebody else has the right to use the data. And if you buy whatever device, you don't know what actually you sign on page 77 of the contract that you sign with this device and what with your data will happen. So the contracting between the people who like to use the data and the population or the patients, that is going to be very interesting in the future.
I believe actually the universities could play quite an important role in all those things that we are just discussing. We organized a workshop a few weeks ago with different stakeholders of the health tech environment. And basically also very soon this question came up, what about the data and who owns the data and what can and should not be done with that data? And among workshop members, we agreed almost all on the point that universities actually have a very good reputation, at least here in Switzerland. They are candidates to actually own, process these health data because people sometimes also feel an urge to provide their data if it is anonymously, if it can be used for R&D. And very often, of course, that R&D is done within a university environment. So why not using this as an advantage and motivate people to share their data? Again, this is just an idea and an outcome of this workshop, but it might give you some insight into what a lot of people think here in Switzerland.
No, absolutely. That's a really valid point as well regarding universities. And I think I totally agree there. But if we can move on to the last point that I wanted to touch on, and that's regarding regulation. What do you think is actually hindering the development of new technologies in regards to regulation? Maybe Jasminka, if we start from you.
Yes, I think to put it to simplify it, to start with here, is we all want safe devices. We don't want any risk by using any of those devices, especially if they're in a low risk class. I think this is it's been a focus that has come up over the past couple of years, and we see as a trend going forward, is that if something is implantable, or it's taking kind of a part or is hurting your body, then is automatically is considered in a higher risk class of that device. So we have had in the past lower kind of classes where there was no regulation, and we've seen that it actually has an impact. It can lead to medical conclusions or interventions that can be life-threatening. So we've seen now that regulation is starting to include new kind of device classes, like software as a device in Europe is a new concept that just came into its regulation. Not just part of a device, but also as a standalone device. And I think this is quite interesting, moving into a finer grade of understanding what they can do and what they should do. But I think it boils down into wishing that there's a controlled and safe way of using them and not putting patients at risk. That of course affects us all and our children going forward.
Absolutely. Very valid points that you make there. Any other comments on the regulation side?
So maybe I want to add a couple of things. So we usually talk very harshly about the regulation, medical norms, and so on, but they are there for a reason, right? So they are supposed to show that the device works, and we want to show that the device is safe to use, as it has been said by Jasminka before. So we see quite a lot of research from academia, a lot of papers that with big claims using machine learning, showing that they can detect blood pressure, glucose, or you name it. So you have crazy statements that when then you actually have to go through a certification and really show with the proper data analysis and power analysis that it works, then the results dissipate, right? So and then that's a pity. So and what I've seen from many startups that come to us is that they try to either not be a medical device, or when it's clear they have to be a medical device, they understand they have to tone down the statements. Right? I think that from the side of university, that it had been mentioned before, it would be very useful if there was some kind of courses already on medical device regulations, for instance, because it's very nice to produce a fancy neural network that is going to predict everything you want, but then if you don't know how to certify this into making to the real world, it just stays a paper. I think that there is disconnection between research and the industry. Could still be, well, I wouldn't call it disconnection, but this disconnection, it can still be improved by a lot. And training people from the university with this mindset that there is some regulation that you have to respect to prove that your thing works is it has to be there. It has to be pushed forward to from the university to actual products in the industry.
Patrick, Tristan, don't know if you have, or Roland, any further comments?
Well, just probably a quick one. I sometimes really wonder whether we're not going too far worldwide with preventing risks, because what is happening to healthcare startups? Well, they might have a good idea, and as soon as they realize there are a lot of regulatory things to be covered, they basically shy away. They leave their idea and try something else. And sometimes I believe this really prevents good ideas which might develop over the years. So we really need to be careful in not overstretching the regulatory framework. I mean, the European Union and Switzerland have the same framework basically, with the introduction of a new law, the MDR. That is evolving into more and more regulation on the sector. So again, we need to just observe that and be careful we do not hinder innovation.
Maybe a very short comment following up on Patrick's. I don't think we need weaker regulations. I don't think that medical regulations are necessarily a bad thing. We really need to develop safe devices in that respect. I fully agree with Jasminka and Ricard before. But maybe smarter regulations would be interesting. I would love to see more dialogue, more awareness raising between research and regulatory bodies. We're talking about Swissmedic. I'd love to see more dialogue in Switzerland between Swissmedic and research institutions like EPFL. I think training engineers and training researchers and in medical regulations and medical affairs is a really good point, but especially also doing the opposite, training regulatory bodies in new technologies and emerging technologies would be really interesting to make smarter regulations.
Yes,
absolutely. Sorry.
I fully agree. I think it's a very valid point. The regulatory science definitely is an interdisciplinary field and should be and become more so in the future.
Great. Well, I'd like to just say thank you so much to all our panel and for this really insightful discussion this morning. I think it's given us a lot of food for thought and definitely a sector that's really booming. And I think it's going to be very much the future moving forward. And I think COVID has definitely accelerated this development as well, even faster than before. So thank you so much to all of you for your great insights, and please get in touch with our panelists if you have any questions or collaborations or any kind of points that you'd like to maybe raise on a one-to-one basis. They're there for you, and I'm sure they'll be delighted to hear from you. So thank you once again for your participation in today's morning session, and again thank you distinguished panelists for taking part in this event that Switzerland Global Enterprises has organised, and it's been a pleasure for me to host this morning. So thank you once again.
Thank you much.
Thanks to all of you.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
See you. Bye bye.